Hi, I'm Ben Sheeran, and in this short video I'm going to tell you about the speaking activity in level 1 of the Fluency course. Now, in some ways the speaking practice is the most important part of the course. It's the part of the course that really has an impact on students, on their confidence. It really livens up the class. It allows the students to get to know each other if they didn't already, and it really makes or breaks the class. So getting this part of the class right is going to make a really big difference to how you run things. So for the speaking practice, we mainly use these question sheets, and you can find them both in the textbooks and also as a download from the website. And the way we use them is we print out the A4 sheets and then we copy them so that they make one A3 sheet, and we give a copy of this to each student, and so they have the one paper for each 4 units. And that's how we structure the speaking. So the students are practicing the same 20 questions for the whole calendar month. And as you can tell, we need to use a variety of different ways of running this activity just to make sure it doesn't get boring or stale. So this is roughly how we kind of break it up. So we're using the same questions for the whole month. And in the first week, we're going to introduce the questions for the first time. We're going to check the meaning. We're going to do quite a bit of read and repeat, and then the students are going to try to use the questions in pairs a little. In week 2, we will review the questions, so we'll do read and repeat again, and then the students will work in pairs. Week 3, they really should be getting it by now. Most of the students will now be able to use the questions, so we're going to practice the questions in pairs. And then week 4, again, we'll practice the questions in pairs, and we want to probably throw in some variations just to keep it interesting. So let's talk about each of those in turn. So in the first week, we're going to introduce the questions, and so we need to make sure that the students understand the questions. When we designed the Fluency course, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't necessary for teachers to speak Japanese, and it wasn't necessary for teachers to use Japanese during class. So this is an example of that kind of design. So in the back of the textbook, there are some pages that show the questions alongside the Japanese translation. And so the first step to introduce the questions is to read and repeat the English and encourage the students to check the Japanese themselves. We're not reading and repeating the Japanese. The students aren't saying the Japanese. They just have the opportunity at this point to check anything that they're not sure of. And we find this is fairly intuitive for the students and very helpful. During the class, when they're doing the activity, particularly in pairs, it's perfectly fine for the students to check if they don't understand the meaning of a question as well. And having this kind of support goes a long way to making the students feel less stressed by using English in class. So we're going to read and repeat the English questions as we go. After this, we're going to go to a different part of the book that has the questions and answers on it. And this is the same as the question papers that we can print out as an optional kind of piece to give the students. And again, we're going to read and repeat, but this time we're going to read and repeat the question and then read and repeat the answers. So this is going to use a lot of our time. We normally aim to do this for about 20 minutes out of a 60-minute class. So by the time we've finished reading and repeating the questions again, we're probably about 10 minutes in. So we've used about half our speaking time. After this, we'll have the students practice in pairs. Now, there's a couple of things that I think are important for this. One is that the students stand up. I think it's so important for the students to stand up for speaking practice. One, it kind of gets the blood flowing. It allows you to move them around. It makes them focus a bit more. And it just works much better than having them kind of slouching in their seats and not really engaging physically with the activity. Another thing that I find is important is to really make sure that the students understand how to do this correctly, i.e. they're making eye contact, they're speaking slowly enough for their partner to follow, and that kind of thing. So we really want to work on training that kind of behavior. We can model it for the students, and we can jump in and give feedback if we see people who aren't managing to do that properly. And so again, we'll have the two students will face each other with their papers. They might janken to see who goes first, and then the first student will ask a question, the other student will answer. There's a couple of ways to do this. We tend to alternate. So one student asks, the other answers. The second student asks, the first student answers, and then they go to the next question. That's one way to do it. You could also have one student ask all the questions and then switch, and so on. So there's different ways to do this, and it's a good idea to change from time to time as well. Generally speaking, when most of the students have finished, we will stop, have the students change partners. I normally encourage the teachers to make the pairs rather than allowing the students to do so. That always runs the risk of a student feeling left out, or students kind of competing to see who can work with each other. I often find with the junior high school first year students, it's better just to assign them to pairs. It makes it easier. The second time they do this, I'll often have the students start at the back. So start from question 20 here, just to make sure that all of them can do the final question. Some of the pairs might not have finished when you finish the activity and change partners. And that's week one. So generally speaking, we'll introduce the questions, we will practice the questions with the teacher, and then we'll do maybe 2 sets of pair practice for students. Week 2, I like to review the questions again. So at the beginning of class, we'll have the students read and repeat the questions and the answers. And that it reminds them of how to do it. It's a bit of reinforcement. And then we'll jump into the pair work. So again, we're practicing in pairs. We can probably do 3 iterations this second week. And so we'll have, the first pair practice, start from question 1, the second time, we'll change partners and we'll start from question 20 and work backwards. And the third time, change partners again, if you've got enough students. And then this time, maybe ask the questions at random, which makes it a bit more difficult because the students have to find the question on their paper. Week 3, by this point, we don't need to review anymore. So we're not going to read and repeat. We're going to jump straight into pair practice. So again, we'll make a pair. They'll ask questions and answer from 1 to 20. Then we'll change partners, then go from 20 to 1. Then we'll change partners again, maybe do random order. Another variation is to have the student who's answering try not to look at their paper. That means that they have to catch the question and answer from memory. And then we can also do this, which is ask the students to provide extra information or to ask follow-up questions. So for example, if you look at question 3 on this paper, what sport do you like? Say, I like soccer. And so some extra information might be, I'm in the soccer club. You'll probably have to model this for the students the first few times. And I probably don't recommend doing this the first month. So at the beginning of the course, when students are still getting used to how things work, they probably don't need the variations to keep it interesting. It's already challenging enough to be interesting. You need to put the variations in when the initial activity gets too easy and therefore becomes a little bit dull. And follow-up questions, of course, would be the person who's asking will have to think of an extra question. So for the what sport do you like? I like soccer. What soccer team do you like? Would be a good follow-up question there. This is quite difficult, and it's helpful to model or for the teacher to give some examples if the students aren't able to do it smoothly themselves. Week 4 is very similar to week 3. So we're practicing in pairs. We're maybe doing some variations. Another thing I like to do in week 4 is have the students change the questions. So physically with a pencil. So for example, question 11, do you have a sister? We'd cross out sister and you could write computer, for example. And this is a great chance to encourage the students to use their own English, or to ask the teacher if they don't know how to say something or if they don't know how to write something. We can write it on the board for them. So if they say, oh, excuse me, what is computer? How do you spell computer? You can put computer on the board. Or if they're like, how do you say pasogon? You can say, oh, it's computer, and this is the spelling. And that really makes them become a bit more active in their English use here. And then once they've changed the questions, I probably give them a couple of minutes to do that. Then they can use their new questions and work in pairs. And this is challenging for the students who are answering because they have to catch the new question. Again, this isn't something I'd do in the first month. I'd probably wait until the second or third month to introduce this variation. And the last variation is they can ask the teacher, and that's kind of interesting. So we normally have the students go back to their seats, and then from their seats, one by one, they'll ask a question to the teacher, and the teacher will answer. And that's just another way to practice without it seeming too samey. So that's the speaking practice. So it's pretty simple. At heart, it's just the students asking and answering the same 20 questions over and over and over again. And then the variations are just to make it seem less boring, maybe give them a chance to do different language. So this kind of drilling practice, the idea is that by the end of it, they should be able to use these questions, but more importantly, they're also internalizing the grammar and the vocabulary that appear in the questions. And over the course of a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, they're actually going to get a lot of language that they have a kind of instinctual understanding of. And that's basically what the Fluency course is all about. If you want some more information, please come to the website or continue watching these videos.